The United Party of Canada is relatively new. Last year, the United Party of Canada leader Grant Abraham ran in the by-election we hosted, and now we have retired DRPS officer Clint Cole carrying the United Party of Canada flag into battle. And Clint joins me today for part 2 of our conversation about why we need to pay attention to the United Party of Canada and why he's running on their behalf in Oshawa, Bowmanville North. Today's guest at Exit 425.
In the main corridor of Exit 425.
Local politicians to connect with families.
What are some unique challenges?
Thanks very much, Steve, for having me.
Exit 425. It's where we live. Clint, welcome to Exit 425. Thank you for meeting me here for part 2 of our conversation.
My absolute pleasure, Steve, and I'm so glad that you're doing this for this community. You're creating conversations that probably, I don't know in this region where with our media that we have, it's been reduced, but you're getting these issues out to a wide audience, and I appreciate that, and I just learned about you recently, so I am so happy and honored to be here.
Awesome. Glad to do it. So Clint, we've talked about a few different issues in part 1. Part 2, let's start with what is paramount, party or constituency, and will you represent the riding to the party or the party to the riding?
Steve, I'll do both. There has to be a balance, but one is interlocked into the other, right? We have to have, our party has to establish policy that's fair for everybody. Then it comes into, application of that policy at the local level. And that application is where I come in. And if I'm listening and I'm paying attention to the riding concerns, I'll see if those party objectives are reaching the end user. And we talked about earlier about having, open discussion, being accessible to the constituents. And I know that follow-up is really important to people. This is not going to be an easy job. There is lots to do right now. There are so many issues on the table. So this is a really important thing that we're going to have to work really hard nationally, as well as through each MP. And I want people to know that we are concerned about people. That's our main objective here. But we're taking a shift in the way we're going to do, national policy that's going to protect our country and protect our people. And I say that I keep referring to that as a broad scope because that will help develop, core policy that people will be able to say, yes, I'm ready for a change and a shift in the way this government is representing its people. I think we're not doing a good job at that. And I that's been validated in my door-to-door campaign over the last 11 days. I've seen this concern in it. And in some cases, I see people talk about just, how are you going to be any different? Our voter turnout on average is really poor over all levels of government. So I think there's a serious lack of public trust in all government. But we have to start with one candidate at a time. So if people are selecting candidates, make sure that you know that candidate as best you can with the information that's out there. And if that candidate actually, is successful in becoming a riding MP, don't give up and say it doesn't make any difference. He's just the same as the next guy or gal in office. They just look after their own interests. Don't do that. Please, we have to re-engage in decision making as a community and make our concerns known. So I want to give hope to people that way. That let's not give up on our democracy. We will bring integrity to the table with each MP that we put on the ballot. We know that has to change if we're going to regain and sustain public trust.
And I think it's the obligation of anyone who is elected to office to do their best to improve that engagement. And when they do things that discourage the engagement, like not being true to their word or being open to local thoughts and opinions, or appearing to be more about the party than about the constituency, then that does little to help things. And so I appreciate what you just said.
Yes.
Several local officials and non-government people have shared on Exit 425 the increased concern for the poor and the homeless, with unhoused refugees complicating the situation even more. You've addressed a little bit about the overabundance of immigration and refugees that we've had in Canada and its effect on the healthcare system, and basically implying that if we can't take care of people, why are we bringing them here? Why are we giving them this false hope? So along with that, in terms of the housing and homelessness issue, is the issue of unhoused refugees complicating the situation with homelessness and poverty even more? Are they connected, and how would you fix this?
Thank you for that question. That's a very important one. And I think the first thing I would do is assess have each individual case assessed first, putting refugees, if we have refugees that were fast-tracked, and we know that's happened, send them back to the homeland if they're as long as their country is not at war. Okay, we believe in humanity, but we have our policies on immigration have allowed loopholes, and I could give you personal accounts about that, but I won't at this point. But I know, in fact, that we need to. Refugees are impacting our resources again for our native homeless here. I mean, our existing residents, they're not getting the services they need. I see that happen a lot in our churches right now, is that when the government drops off on providing services, the churches have to try and pick up the best they can with food banks. Our food banks are at all-time high, but their resources are getting more depleted, And so, once again, there's only so much volume of support that we can give. And so we need to really restrict how we and the rate at which we bring people in. And if people are coming in, they have to come in with some resources so that they're not a burden to all of our services, not especially health. But in my experience as a police officer, you can't put a homeless, addicted person into housing without them having to go through counseling. Okay, I've witnessed that happen through some of the housing initiatives in our local community in Oshawa, and they need to go through counseling, and we should use that clubhouse model program to help them learn the life skills they need to use on their own. So it's not just about housing, it's about how we transition our homeless into housing to make it sustainable and valid. Okay, because we've had, even in North Oshawa, we had that attempt at homing, giving shelter to our homeless drug addicts, and that wasn't well managed, because the resources that were needed there socially to counsel these people and do proper addiction counseling weren't there. So that turned into a bad experiment, and of course the community objected back to that, and so that whole initiative had to be canceled. So that it needs to be thought out well, carried out well, for it to be sustainable and having the outcome we want. Not just putting it in a box and saying, okay, that'll take care of itself. But I've never seen so many homeless people on the streets in Oshawa and even in Bowmanville. And I even see people from other countries as well begging at the grocery stores. we can't carry on with the models that we have right now. We can't. They're not working sufficiently. And so it goes back to, okay, the source issue, the root issue, and that's responsible immigration, as well as responsible care for those that are homeless. But a lot of them are homeless because of drug addiction.
And I hear your message as, we just can't declare something and without backing that program up with the proper resources, right? So,
Yes, right.
If we're going to do some housing for homeless people and provide some housing, they need the support in order to properly use that and benefit from it, because that's why they've been homeless, right? There's and I'm oversimplifying the issue, obviously, but it's not a one-shot deal where here's a house, good luck. It doesn't work. They still need a lot of resources to move on and to truly benefit from that new situation. So let's move on to.
And I also could I
Oh,
add one
okay.
other thing, Steve, on that
Yep.
particular note. I would lobby to stop the policy of in relation to those. I mean, there's mental health issues along with drug addiction. One or both or combined. So we need social services to be able to help with mental health addiction, and not just giving people methadone and saying, have a happy day. These people need concentrated supports at the front end to get them back into our society. Okay. But one of the problems I've seen in my experience as a police officer is that this policy of a safe supply of drugs, there's really no such thing as a safe supply of drugs. Okay, so this reduce harm philosophy in our bureaucracy that thinks that reduce harm is the only way to help these people. Well, I've watched the transition happen where people are on methadone and using methadone daily, and then also staying on with their drug addiction, source that's which you just can't throw those kinds of mechanisms at these people. It has to be a comprehensive approach where their basic needs are met, but then their needs to reintegrate socially have to be supported with professional help and the community, because the churches not only the churches but ordinary people are willing to jump in and get involved if they know that these there's proper support systems. I'll just leave it at that.
I like that term, comprehensive, and so many times when we approach an issue, regardless of what it is, unless we take that comprehensive approach, it's going to fail because it's not covering all the angles. So thank you for that. Again, moving on now, how can we reconcile our northern climate, the limited farmland? You've touched on that issue earlier on. How do we reconcile all these things with food security and the need to build more homes? It doesn't appear to be done well now by anybody, so it's kind of a clean slate that way. Is there a more creative solution that respects the capacity to grow food, which, again, in our northern climate is an issue?
Yeah, thanks for that question. That's a big, important one. Okay. I have to ask myself first, what's the driving need for more skyscrapers, like high-rise, high-density housing, when we're about, at the brink of a recession? So who's going to be buying these homes here in Canada? I don't know if you're familiar with Sam Cooper, author Sam Cooper. He's the author of a book named Willful Blindness, about how money laundering is now inundated in the building industry in the GTA, and that has impact in the price of our housing as well, even in concentrated housing. So I believe we should have a moratorium on building right now. We're building faster, without affordability. We need to look how we rebuild Are we building, are we building condos, luxury condos, or are we building affordable family units, right? And how do we support that with provincial governments and regional official plans? So I think we need to investigate. This comes back to the aspect of who has interference in our real estate in this area, and if we don't address that, those nefarious agendas are gonna take us in another direction. That's not the only scope of what we need to do, but I see there's a multi-level story building in Curtis, on the south side of Curtis at Trolls Road. But now I don't see construction happening. I'm hearing there's some difficulties with whether or not that's being a viable project that is going to get completed anytime soon. I'm not sure what happens, but we have to plan better at where we're going to put high density, and who are the target homeless groups, and who are the target people that are going to use those resources, right? Because our regulation in the housing industry is pretty. We have to, whatever that regulation is, it has to be flexible for the needs of that community. And sometimes they're very rigid, and we don't get the kind of housing in the right proportion for the right people that are looking for it. So the RCMP stated a few months back in committee that, just to support this idea, because I want to bring this out, not just because of my background, but because it's really important for public safety, even within the real estate industry. The RCMP and committee said just a couple of months ago that there are 4,000 standalone criminal gangs, in in Canada, and the focal point is Montreal, GTA, and Vancouver. So let's look at how let's get some of those investigations, get the tools to stop that. So we have to protect our farmland. Our food security is really important. So let's not just, because developers love farmland. It's real easy to develop on farmland as opposed to other types of grounds. But we can't be that short-sighted just because it's economical. And if farmers, and I've talked to farmers, the Durham Farm Network, and they're saying, if our farmers don't get supports, then they're going to cave in to developers coming to them with big dollars, right? And they're going to sell out. So there's that, free market pressure. And if our young people are not going to take over these farms, guess what? Developers are right at the door, like a wolf, and saying, I'll give you some good money and you can retire comfortably. And yet that farm has taken generations of work to be established. So housing is important, but again, I'll come back to the fact that we've got to have a real balanced approach to this, and that's going to take. We're going to have to roll up our sleeves with the provincial government in how they formulate, and the region with these official plans. There's a lot of work to be done there, but we need our people showing up at these council meetings too and giving input. And I seen that happen just a week ago in Clarington Council. But just to add to that, sorry, I just had one other point. He said, let's consult with our farmers. Let's let them tell us what they can grow here locally. Okay, so for example, do we keep buying our cucumbers from Spain, or could we incentivize our farmers to grow greenhouses here and have a steady supply of cucumbers all year round? I know that happens. I know that is happening elsewhere. So, we can shift our focus. We have technologies in farming that are advancing, and I think we need to be more sustainable with our food supply to achieve food security. And let's have farmers interacting with the community and having farm markets. We can do that. I know that our base supply isn't developed yet, but let's encourage that. I know another farmer down not far from me in my own community, and we should be able to give them. They're doing apple cider, for example. But they could use support, even some grant money to get them going. And these are the kinds of things we should be looking at to really incentivize that ability to be more self-sustainable than relying on our cross-border food commerce that I see happening, and the costs for trucking and everything else when we could grow it here. I think we'd also be if we subscribe to that, as a tertiary effect, we'd have a lower environmental footprint too, with all the trucking and everything to bring those resources here when we can in fact grow it here. I'll leave it there.
Well, and to be creative, there are places in northern countries where they use the cooling system of thermal power plants to
Yes.
heat the town and heat streets, and they could easily be used to heat greenhouses that could grow, softer vegetables and fruits and that sort of thing, and probably vegetables more than fruits, but still you could do a lot, and there's a lot to be done, but all that to manage our food security. And your analogy of your description of the best land to build houses on, it's a story that I often told to my students. The best place to grow food is the best place to grow houses as well. The easiest place to grow houses, certainly. So let's move on to the source of a lot of our conversation and a lot of fodder for news shows right now. The trade issues with the USA have made us more appreciative of Canada. We've talked about some of the vulnerabilities that we've become acutely aware of. We've talked about food security, but what about jobs and energy and the renewed interest in the East-West pipeline? What do you see with all these issues? That's what's the view of the United Party of Canada and how to move forward with this stuff?
I think nationally, our party is saying, let's unleash our natural energy resources. We would immediately put back on track the Keystone XL pipeline, so we can have movement of those resources, natural gas as well, to the east end of the country. We have the technology that was shut down, but we need to reopen that. And I think we need to realize what Alberta is saying to us, in their, as being the resource-rich nation they are with the oil, tar sands, and natural gas. They're upset at the transfer payments that they're paying to the east, okay, and they're not getting much in return with those transfer payments. I think we're upwards of $1 trillion of transfer payments from Alberta in the last since the 1960s when they started. So they're getting fed up with that. Why are we not taking advantage of that resource and having interprovincial trade with them? So, that includes natural gas. There must be an interprovincial trade that includes gas from Alberta. Free trade and NAFTA removed our best paying jobs, but let us become beholden to China and our dollar stores with no critical infrastructure. And we don't even create our own pharmaceuticals. A sufficient supply of pharmaceuticals for our seniors. With the proposition that we could face a trade war, right? We could face a trade war now. And how much production, how sustainable we are with our medical supplies, if it's all being made in China. Even during COVID, all of our test kits came from China. We were strapped to get test kits. It's just we've given too much away offshore. It's time to reshore our jobs so that we can again buy local, but that will take time so that we trade until we can build our country back up again and bring those kinds of manufacturing back here. that we sold out to, other countries because there was cheaper labor. I think we can create incentives to help turn that around, it, at a calculated speed, but so we'll have to trade until we can do that. But that should be our focus and emphasis in getting that kind of industry back into Canada and encouraging provincial trade rather than having people, us losing. To me, the last thing we need to do is see our, provinces say, I'm not playing in your federal sandbox anymore because it's not fair. We need to look at how we could share those resources and become more productive and have a cooperative federal system of commerce, and we have to promote that, because if we're looking for those kinds of resources offshore, it's going to cost us more all the way around, and then we're also going to be subject to tariffs, and tariffs are we can have better if we have better relationships with other countries and stop this creating tariffs and then counter tariffs. That's not a good space to be in. So I think we need, in our leadership, we need better negotiation with our trade partners to the south as well. Start there with that, but we also can look at other supplies in other countries for our basic, core raw resources. But we have a lot to offer in Canada, and I think there are enough trade, free trade versus fair trade. I mean, that's another discussion, but I think we have to realize where we are now and how do we get here and how do we get ourselves out of that. But I think it needs responsible communication between countries that shows some willingness to put up the flag and say, hey, we can make this work better than out tariffing each other.
Clint, your party can't form a government, but how can you continue to fight for your and your party's ideals and those of Bowmanville Oshawa North, whether or not you win a seat in Parliament?
Fair question. I'm going to continue doing what I'm doing. I don't disengage just because I'm not going to, if I'm not successful in this endeavor. My community involvement is going to continue with local councils and regional councils, and with being involved in our community and giving them supports where they need as a citizen of this area. But I'm not going to shy away from being involved in committees, at the city level, and paying attention to what government policies are being drafted and where it's taking us. And I'll have a connection with the federal party as well, so that I know how things are going to develop in the next year or two. We have other elections happening next year, so we'll see. And I think it's important. I want to stay in touch with the school boards as well and the trustees, so that we can protect our children in those spaces in the education system. Lots to do. You can't just walk away.
You're either involved or you're not, right? So
Right.
Any final thoughts? And do you look at the Conservative Party as a conservative party?
Good question. I see a trend happening in the Conservative Party. The Conservative Party has a big, wide tent from left to right. I see our Conservative parties bowing to global interests, to their own political agendas, and really not addressing the needs of people. I think they need to focus on really properly representing the people. This party, United Party of Canada, is conservative in policy and nature, but we want to bring more accountability back to the people, to our electorate, because we're not seeing that. And once we see a rise in public involvement, but we have to facilitate that. So again, I think we need to really clamp down on these globalist entities that are trying to push us into a post-national state. We need to secure our borders, and we need to have responsible immigration, and we need to protect our children and our families. So those are my priorities that I say that this party will commit to, and we will be bold about it. So if we even win a few seats in Parliament, we won't form government. We know that, but let's start leveraging from the inside and bringing these important values into Parliament. And I'll expose what's going on in Parliament at the draft level of bill implementation, because I think we're finding out way too late. When these bills reach third, fourth, and royal assent, then we're finding out what these bills are. So we'll bring that to the public attention sooner as they're drafted. And I will do that
Clint,
myself.
thank you for meeting me here at Exit 425 today, and this for part 2 of our conversation. How can people get in touch with you?
They can get in touch with me through my email, clintsupccampaign at gmail.com, and through the United Party. I have connections with the United Party, and they will give me correspondence from anybody that connects to the United Party. That might be the easiest way right now, and I welcome anybody reaching out. I appreciate the privilege of being here today and speaking to your audience.
Thank you very much. And again, thank you for being here and taking time out of your campaign. We're actually recording this pretty early in the morning to facilitate some more canvassing on Monday. So, Clint, thanks very much, and good luck with the campaign.
Thank you very much, Steve. I appreciate it.